Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Mouthpiece Musings, the series that was never meant to be a series. It just turns out that I've ended up talking about mouthpieces quite a bit, and so I'm keeping these videos slightly separated from the TCE content. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the process of designing and making the new Neoteric Brass Principal Cornet mouthpiece. That is the name Principal. It's not specifically for Principal cornet players. Okay, so let's get into it after this. Right then, so I've got a few topics to get through. I'm going to start off, I suppose, by discussing why I have created this wonderful mouthpiece. Obviously, in the beginning, I'm coming at this from the perspective of somebody who is a TCE practitioner and teacher, and at this time, there really isn't a suitable cornet mouthpiece for people who wish to learn and use the TCE. There have been cornet mouthpieces made by Jerome Khalett, and I know that I've seen Bob Civiletti using his TCE3 adapted for cornet. But I know from sort of talking with people and from owning a few of these mouthpieces myself that, Jerome Khalett did not intend on people playing with the British brass band cornet sound. His primary concern in designing a cornet mouthpiece was to, very much like with his trumpet mouthpieces, to help assist people to stop spreading their sound. And he was after a mouthpiece with a lot of core and overtones, which in many ways leads us down the path of creating a trumpet-like sound, which isn't going to blend well in a British brass band. Now, I don't think that British brass band is necessarily the pinnacle, or at least the primary use for a cornet. I actually use a cornet for jazz quite a lot because I play in a 20s band fairly frequently. Here is the cornet that I use. This is my Con. It's a Conquest, which I don't even think was intended as a professional instrument. Maybe an intermediate instrument. Does it have a number on it? I'm sure it does. It would be here, wouldn't it? It doesn't have a number on it. So this is a Conquest. It was made in the 1970s, and I've described it many times as being an extra large bore instrument. The measurement of the diameter of tubing on the second valve is 0.484 inches, which is kind of like a small bore trombone. Just for reference, a medium large trumpet would be like 460. A large bore or like a lot of Khalett stuff was 470. Super large bore would be 474, and that's still tenths of an inch smaller than that instrument. It's a wonderful cornet. It plays so well, and for something of its dimensions, that the intonation is really good as well. But anyway, that's a bit of a sidetrack, not what I'm talking about. So other options that people could try for mouthpieces for cornet, for TCE may lead you down the path of experimenting with Vincent Bach and that sort of thing. But I think that what I have found, I've actually got a better collection of Vincent Bach cornet mouthpieces than I do trumpet, including sort of 1.5C, 3C, 10.5C, 17C. All of these mouthpieces, to my ear, make a trumpet-like sound on the cornet. I think there's an interesting period of what was trendy and what was the trendy instrument to use around from say 1900 to 1930, when the designs of cornets were evolving to the point that they were essentially, cornets and B-flat trumpets were essentially the same instrument with a different mouthpiece. I've read some really interesting articles. In fact, there's a website who, I don't remember the guy's name, I'll stick it in the show notes, where he had deconstructed and measured a bunch of vintage cornets and trumpets, and actually found that there were trumpets that were more conical than cornets, and cornets that were more cylindrical than trumpets. And really, I think that maybe one of the main differences between the instruments these days is just the number of 180 degree turns. I saw an interesting video recently with a guy who claimed that actually the existence of a lead pipe is what differentiates a trumpet from a cornet, which pretty much means that most old rotary valve trumpets are the only true trumpets that still remain. It's an interesting argument, and I think I pretty much buy into it. The thing that I've always said is that when you look at the Baroque trumpet, or the trumpet in F from the 19th century, those were more cylindrical instruments, and the cornet is, by comparison, because it's a little horn, hence the name, is a conical instrument. But no modern cornet or trumpet made since about 1900 really is any different in that respect. They are the same instrument, they're just a different shape. Again, I'm just going off on one now, and I'm going to follow this path because I find it really interesting. Another thing that differentiates cornets and trumpets may be how far down the length of tubing the valve block is. So, a flugelhorn, you've got about this much tube before it goes into the valve block directly. This cornet here is unusual because the lead pipe goes straight into the first valve and not the third. So yeah, that's a thing that would make a difference. I think it does make a difference with that instrument there. You do feel a more immediate effect when you push the valves, so it's going to give you a cleaner execution when you're slurring fast scales. Okay, let's get back on track. I think it's worth just talking about a few more cornet mouthpieces that exist. One of my first cornets that I played was a Yamaha 2330. And it came with a mouthpiece in the case, which was an 11E4. Now that's following the sort of Schilke numbering system. So an 11 is approximately the diameter of, say, a Bach 7C for comparison. And then the E was the deep cup, and the 4 means the slightly flatter rim. I think that if you're playing in the lowest 2 octaves of the cornet range and never any more than that, then it's probably a perfectly acceptable mouthpiece. But there's something strange about those mouthpieces that makes them feel quite stuffy. You don't seem to be able to really get any resonance on them. And I think, what other things are there that exist that you could sort of compare it to? Well, a lot of brass band cornet players at the time would be using Dennis Wicks, and so the Dennis Wicks sort of has a very characteristic sort of, somebody once called it a donut sound when describing it to me. I think it's a dull, uninteresting sound that comes from the Dennis Wick mouthpieces. I'm going to complain about them a bit more later on, so let's not get too into that. The throat on those things is far too big. But then by comparison, I've come to learn that I think that the throat on the Yamaha ones is too small. So for a cornet at least, that's one of the things we're talking about. So actually, for a while when I was young, I played on a Yamaha 7D4D. Which is one that comes with the soprano cornet, and I played my first top C's. There was a bit of a thing from the past. High C's, the C above the staff. I played my first high C's on that mouthpiece on my Yamaha cornet. I think I was about 12 years old. I'd been playing for about 18 months, not 2 years. So that says a lot, because I've worked with hundreds of young people struggling to learn to play brass instruments, and very few of them ever achieve that sort of range in that sort of time scale. Very few, if I'm not going to say if any, of course there are plenty, but I've taught kids who've played for years and are barely struggling to play 2 octaves on the instrument. To be honest, that's how I got into all of this stuff. That's how I got into the TCE, because I knew that nothing that was, none of the standard ideas that were out there and the teaching materials were actually helping people to learn to play better. And so my research into how to play the cornet better, how to play the trumpet better, led me to TCE, which is not something that I regret for a second. Okay, so let's get things back on track. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through the process of designing this cornet mouthpiece, because really that's the interesting thing about this video. So I think I mentioned in a previous video that in order to create this mouthpiece, I worked with a guy called Michael Barkley. Now I've known Mike for many years, and we've talked quite a lot about our approach to playing, which, although he's not into TCE, is pretty similar to mine. I think my understanding of trumpet playing has evolved alongside his through many of the conversations that we've had. He's a fantastic trumpet player, high note specialist as well. Amazing upper register. But anyway, he does some work where he uses VenCAD, the software supplied by Venture Mouthpieces. It's free, by the way. Go download it and try it out. And he will give people consultations where he'll sit them down and he'll talk them through what their playing is. He talks about what their goals are, what they're trying to improve through changing their equipment and this sort of thing, what their preferences are in terms of things like cup size and shape, and what kind of rim diameter they prefer, what profile they prefer, all this sort of business. And over the course of this sort of conversation, these consultations, Mike will then, if he's got enough, he'll design a mouthpiece for the person, or he'll make a tweak to the mouthpiece that they already use. And then on to the exciting bit is he will produce these 3D printed plastic prototypes. Now these things, this is a funny thing about plastic mouthpieces, is that in the past they were generally not very good, and I think that the reason for that is that they were pretty much all just cheap knockoffs of bad mouthpieces. You could get a 4B for cornet, which was copied from a Dennis Wick 4B, and you can get a 7C for trumpet, and it's like, why copy the worst mouthpieces that exist? I know you could get a 1.5C. I think that maybe the Kelly Screamer was the first good plastic mouthpiece that was used, and popularized somewhat by Bobby Shu, who used it alongside his copy of his Shu Jazz mouthpiece, which is essentially just a 3C. So yeah, that's, plastic mouthpieces in the past were a bit of a waste of time. But, technology has moved on a lot, and certainly different types of 3D printing that I don't pretend to know very much about have got us to a stage where we can create these mouthpieces that, to an incredible degree of accuracy, that will give us a very good idea of how our designs are going to affect the feel and sound produced by adjusting different variables. Now, what actually happened? The story goes like this: is that Mike had been working with somebody to produce a series of classical orientated trumpet mouthpieces, which were for his own playing. So Mike uses a rim that's slightly larger and rounder than mine, larger diameter, I should say. It's and so he had all these prototype classical trumpet mouthpieces, and he after he'd finished trying them himself, he sent them over to me. Now, it had just so happened that I was playing with the Bristol Opera Company for that week. We did La Traviata. And so I took a bunch of these mouthpieces along with me, and I played on them in a proper ensemble setting where I could really test them out in the real environment rather than just in my practice room. And there were some interesting things. I mean, that you could clearly see that he had tried smaller cup, bigger cup, variations on the throat entrance, this sort of thing. But there was one mouthpiece that was actually the very first prototype he'd printed, that to my ear just sounded a little bit, made my trumpet sound a little bit like a cornet. And we'd already been discussing the idea of me making a cornet mouthpiece. So I just said to him, look, can you take this cup, put my rim on it, and stick it on a cornet shank, send it my way, and we'll see what I can see if I like it as a cornet mouthpiece. So he actually did that, and he also sent me one with he'd printed himself one out to try, and he sent me that as well. So that gave me, it wasn't these two mouthpieces, but I don't know if you can really see the difference with these two. But this is a slightly rounder one there, and this is the slightly, the one with my rim on it, which is probably slightly flatter. But with these tones, it's quite hard to see. So anyway, I tried out these two mouthpieces, and I liked them both. I mean, they were great cornet mouthpieces. They were kind of sounding quite similar to that Yamaha 7D4D that I'd liked from the past. And I was really shocked at how well balanced it was, how well it could play on the with that size throat, with that really quite a small internal diameter for a cornet mouthpiece, I suppose. Maybe not a vintage cornet mouthpiece, but a modern one. Almost, so many modern cornet mouthpieces have that diameter, kind of like the 7C, the Wick 4, or the Yamaha 11, the Bach 7 size. I think it's 0.640 internal diameter is the inches, is sort of that sort of ballpark. But anyway, so what we found from testing the same cup, same backbore, same throat, but different rims, is that it confirmed what I had found in the past when trying various trumpet mouthpieces, and that is that this rim that I use on all of my mouthpieces, which is a Dominic Calicchio rim that was copied by Jerome Calet in about 2007 or 8. It actually makes a darker sound than a rounder rim with less cushion and even a larger internal diameter. And so yes, I doubled down on the fact that I really, really like this rim. I was a little concerned with the plastic that I didn't quite have the flexibility I wanted, but all those fears were gone when I had one made in metal, so that was great. But essentially, Mike felt that it still sounded a little bit too trumpet-like. Now, I was sort of listening to it with my TCE ears, and I was enjoying having a good attack and some overtone content in the sound to make the cornet resonant, but thinking that the deeper cup was what was making it cornet-like. And he sort of said to me that he wanted to try another idea, and so that's when he made these two mouthpieces, which again was one with his rim and one with mine. And basically what he adjusted was the curve at the bottom of the cup going into the throat. Now, most if not all, modern trumpet and cornet mouthpiece designs are actually double cups. There's a lot of hype out there about double cups. And strangely, in my city, there are quite a few trumpet players who think that there's some kind of novelty to using a Parduba double cup. It's absolute. I mean, I would say of all of the double cup mouthpieces, the Parduba is probably one of the worst, even though we do know that obviously Harry James used one. Harry James's actual mouthpiece is nothing like the ones that you can buy, because the story goes that Harry James's mouthpiece was made by hand by Mr. Parduba Senior himself, and he didn't remember the design, he didn't commit it to memory, he didn't replicate it. And so although you could say that, yes, okay, a 4.5 HJ Parduba is quite similar to what he played, it's not exactly the same. And the Super Chops 3 mouthpiece that Jerome Kallett was selling was actually based upon a Dominic Colicchio mouthpiece that was found in Harry James's trumpet case. And so it's quite likely that the Super Chops 3 is much closer to the Parduba that Harry James used. Anyway, it's a great rim. I'm really happy to be using it universally across all my trumpet and cornet mouthpieces, and I use a Super Chops 3 on my flugelhorn. So all of my playing's done with that same face to instrument interface, and I find it super comfortable. I've had a lot of compliments from conductors about the clarity of my sound, which I think has got a lot to do with the rim and the style of my attacks and that sort of thing. So yeah, I'm doubling down on that, and it works excellently on the cornet. So Mike made adjustments to the second cup. Essentially, that if you imagine you're talking about a trumpet mouthpiece, and you've got your bowl and then your throat entrance. Well, he opened that throat entrance, and that just opened up that brass band cornet sound that we were searching for. And yeah, I should probably mention the throat, because on 2 of my trumpet mouthpieces I use a 28 throat, and a CJ Mod, which was one of the new ones, that's got a 27 throat, the standard. And I don't think that is necessary for the cornet, because the music you play is different, because the range you play in is different, and because this first section of the lead pipe is smaller, and so the effect that the throat size has on that is different. The first 6 inches of a cornet is what makes it different from a trumpet, and that's, I'm not going to start down that path again, because I've already basically done it. So anyway, that's how we got to the design of the principal mouthpiece for cornet by Neoteric Brass. Now, you've heard a little bit of a recording at the beginning of the video, and I'm going to play the whole thing at the end. What else do we need to talk about? The only other thing I wanted to mention was the backbore. So we did a little bit of research into cornet backbores, and sort of some popular designs, and saw some scans of popular cornet mouthpieces that I won't repeat the name of the manufacturer, but we basically found that on some brass band mouthpieces the backbore has not been designed at all. It's just a straight line from the throat to the end of the mouthpiece, and not only that, but there isn't really a cylindrical section to the throat of these mouthpieces, which means that it's a straight line from the bottom of the cup to the bottom of the mouthpiece. And these are not necessarily just the cheap off the shelf ones, but also I've seen scans of another popular manufacturer of brass band mouthpieces, and compared those scans to the others to find that they are absolutely identical. So there are people out there using artist model mouthpieces made by one manufacturer that are just a straight up copy of another. And not only that, but they're a terrible design, or absolute lack of design, you could say, because the backbore has no shape. And it was really, The thing is, I'm not going to say it was interesting or eye-opening to see that, because I know these cornet and horn mouthpieces are terrible. That's why there are so many struggling players out there who can't play in tune and have no centre to their sound and all the rest. But so Mike designed a back bore to go with my cornet mouthpiece. I'm not going to pretend that I had much influence in that, but I'm very satisfied with the result. I think the intonation is fantastic. I'm very happy with the ease with which I can play with a centered sound and clear attack on the cornet without going beyond the bounds of the definition of a brass band cornet sound. And it's also great for jazz. So what I'm going to show you now is a video of me playing part of a piece of music. Now, it's contemporary, sort of 20th century, I should say, sort of classical trumpet repertoire played on the cornet, because, yeah, that's what I chose to do. And I play part of it with a plastic mouthpiece and part of it with the metal mouthpiece, because I want you to see and hear the difference. So you will hear a subtle difference, but overwhelmingly, I think that what this recording demonstrates is that difference is so small that you can absolutely rely on this 3D printing system for prototyping mouthpieces, and you can see and hear, you know, the tool that I practiced on before settling on this design. The plastic mouthpieces are good. These 3D printed plastic mouthpieces are good for about what did we say? I think it was about 250 hours of use. And really the only thing that starts to become compromised is that the thinnest part of the mouthpiece, which is the back bore and the shank, they start to wear, and so the mouthpiece can get pushed further and further into the instrument. But you know, that's how long does it take you to do 250 hours of practice? I think for most people that's you know, quite a few months. So they're really good for that. Yeah, so have a listen. This is the most important thing, really, is hearing comparatively the difference. And then again, I'll play the rest of that duet at the end with some nice photos of my cornet and the principal mouthpiece for cornet from neotericbrass.com. I'll put some photos of that up as well for you to enjoy. So I hope you find this interesting. Thank you for watching, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye for now. Yeah, me again. So this is future rich in the editing process. I've realized that I didn't mention two things. Number one, if you want to use Mike's professional services, then you should just go to barkleymike.com. You'll find information for contacting him there. He's also on Instagram, Michael Barkley Music. If you just search for Barkley microphone or something like that, remember this thing? Yeah, that's the same guy. So yeah, do get in touch with Mike and you know, hit him up and ask him about all this stuff, because he's always happy to share his knowledge. And you know, if you don't want my cornet mouthpiece, but you need some tweaks to the one that you use, if you feel that your playing could just do with that extra 5%, then, you know, hit them up. By all means, get in touch with me as well. I'm more than happy to talk. I teach teach brass. I teach the TCE. I will happily discuss with you the mouthpieces that I make, the mouthpieces that I sell. So that's the thing. Here's another important point that I missed, and that is this book here, by my good friend Dave Bertie. Dave put a lot of work into this fantastic book, all about the Saint Jacome method. He's taken what was an old disorganized mess of a method book and ordered it into he ordered it into a really good usable guide to practicing and developing your cornet playing, or indeed trumpet playing as well. In the beginning of this book, Dave tells the life and times of Saint Jacome, which is a really enjoyable read, where he goes into the life and times, exactly what I just said. Please have a look for this book online. It's published by Charles Collins, so you can get it anywhere good. Well worth the money. I played the duet out of the back of this book, which is why I'm mentioning it now. Hit Dave up, talk to him about that. He's a really a true scholar of brass instruments, and it's not the only book he's written. So that was definitely worth a mention. Please enjoy the recording.